Hi, everybody. My name is Catherine, and I oversee family programming and community programming and partnerships at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Today is World Mental Health Day, and I'm really honored to be hosting our virtual discussion about music and mental health, two topics that are deeply personal to me. We have some great guests here today that are going to help us dig into how music and mental health intersect. I'd like to welcome Kevin Lyman, creator of the Vans Warped Tour, who has spent his career bringing people together and raising awareness for mental health. I'd also like to welcome Debbie Bates, manager of music therapy at the Cleveland Clinic. Hi, Debbie. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, how are you, Rebecca? Good to see you.
Good to see you guys. And our last guest is Archie Green, Cleveland rapper and producer who's used his own music to help himself and others with the stigma of mental health. Hi, Archie.
Hey, Catherine. How are you?
Good. Thank you guys all for being here. You guys all have a wealth of experience, both personally and in your careers. And I'm really looking forward to diving into this topic with all of you today. So we've got a couple questions, but I'm really looking forward to hearing from each of you. Maybe Kevin, do you want to get started with us? You've been involved in the music industry for over 40 years. How have you seen mental health affect the industry and the artists involved?
Well, I think it's affected in so many ways, and especially as you know, being someone who's been on the road for so long and doing things the industry shifted to a live business. That separation from family, that being on the road, the stresses of the road. And especially during this time of the pandemic, now we're watching two phases. One, we're watching, fans that may potentially be affected by post-PTSD due to COVID, and how are they going to digest music in a different way, and how, because music is an important part of their life. And then on the other end, we've got musicians, crew people, support people to touring right now that had their livelihoods pulled out. And those dynamics, a lot of times, I don't think we've ever seen more divorces in our industry right now, because you have people that had grown together and now they're living full time together. They're not going out on the road, not doing those things, causing those kind of stresses, and how to deal with that. So I think we're a microcosm of society as a whole, but where some industries have started to come back and you see businesses, we're still pretty much idled in so many ways, and trying to figure out how to move forward for both the fans as well as the people that are in the industry. Those are my observations at this point.
Yeah, I see a lot of venues who are really trying to evaluate how to restart and how to engage artists. We were able to have some live music this summer, but it wasn't our full scale of things. And, we usually have touring artists and local artists, and we did some small scale stuff, but, nothing like we normally would have. And we're not a venue like some of the larger venues. So it's been really interesting to sort of see how these places are trying to adjust and make things work in this time. And you've worked with multitude of artists throughout the years, so I'm sure you've seen trends change and things like that, but I'm sure it's been very different the last 8 months or so.
Well, I mean, absolutely. I mean, you're lucky you got a few shows in, and I live on the West Coast where we've been pretty much shut down completely since that time. And being a full-time professor at USC now, watching, the dynamics of working with young people and the stresses they're facing, that teaching all my classes on Zoom now and not having that separation. So, I think it's interesting that COVID, is the catalyst to so much of this right now, but everyone has their own journeys within it, and it's affecting people. And everyone has their own journey. They're going through it. And, just the stresses of society right now,
it's compounding things. It really seems like it. It seems like, everybody's obviously got the things that were already previously going on in their lives. But, I know myself, being more isolated and things the last 8 months, I've seen my own flare-ups of, anxiety and depression, and not being able to have that in-person connection as much as we normally would. It's a huge part of our lives. And as much as virtual things like this can do a little bit of that, it's just not the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And, being that it's World Mental Health Day, it is a reminder that we need to reach out to people, and I think a lot of us are isolating ourselves, and we're very social creatures, and especially in our business, we're used to being around people, but we're finding that, you can only have these topics so much. You're kind of we're caught, I like to say, in a weird state of suspended animation, where we're all kind of floating out there, and how do we keep that connection? And, today is a day to remember to reach out to someone, just say hello, but we should be doing that on an everyday basis. So I randomly scroll through my phone sometimes and just go, I'm going to call this person and say hello. And it really, you could just tell for them as well as myself, just reminds us who we are.
Yeah. Archie, you're a rapper and producer yourself. If you would tell us a little bit about your music and also maybe the things that you've been experiencing during COVID and your experience with mental health and the things that you're doing with Peel Them Layers Back.
Sure. So I've been doing music for a little over 20 years. And although I had all of these great and grand ambitions of becoming like this huge rap star, it wasn't until I wrote a song that was bigger than me that I was given such a platform. And that song was birthed out of my own personal pain, demons, and life with depression. The song was called Layers. It was written and released in 2016. It was basically my testimony about living with depression and how therapy saved my life. And at that time, there wasn't as big a conversation within the Black community, even in the rap community, about going to therapy. As far as talking about depression and coping with depression, whether it was Mom Playing Tricks on Me by the Ghetto Boys or the grand and glorious catalog of Kid Cudi, Cleveland native, there wasn't a lot of conversation about depression and mental health specifically. So the song ended up premiering at Vice.com. Was part of an article about hip hop artists talking about depression. And
was that back in 2016, Archie?
Yes. And, and that for me was a sign that, this is something that is bigger than just a song. It needs to be talked about specifically in the Black community. And if we can use hip hop culture as a vehicle to break the stigma, then we can save some lives. And so what I ended up deciding to do was starting a mental health awareness organization called Peel Them Layers Back, which was based on the actual hook of the song Layers. And basically running this organization as, an organization that empowers, educates, and equips the Black community with tools to live a mentally healthy life. When we started in 2016, coincidentally, Debbie Bates was present at our first event.
I heard, yeah, when we were connecting with Debbie about this, I said, oh, we're talking to a local, rapper, yeah. And she goes, this is Archie, and I said, it is.
Yeah, so this is like a full circle moment.
That's so great.
And in that time, over the past 4 years, we've done some amazing things just in terms of the type of work that I do is workshops. So I'll go to schools, colleges, and we'll have conversations about mental health. I'll tell my story, how, for me, I was confronted with my depression in 2014. After a year of having my license suspended, I had gotten a DUI the year prior to that. So I had really hit my lowest point in my life. And it wasn't until I went to therapy that I was clinically diagnosed with depression and learned how to live with it. And so the main thing that we do as far as our work is we try to teach people how to use coping mechanisms in real time. We've also made a little bit of history. As you can see in the poster behind me, we did this project called My Violin Weighs a Ton, which was colliding the worlds of hip hop and classical music while also discussing areas of mental health within the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. So we partnered with Lexington Bell Community Center in the Huff neighborhood, which CMSD back in 2017 was one of the nation's leaders in suicide rates, meaning 2 in every 10 high schoolers had attempted suicide. And so I wanted to do a program within that district to kind of combat that, to catch them right before. These kids were aged between 4 and 14. And as part of this program, which, we got funding from COG Arts and Culture and some great donors in the Cleveland community. We taught these kids how to play classical guitar. We taught them how to write their own lyrics, poetry, which the song they wanted to perform was Old Town Road, which was a popular song last year by Lil Nas X. And we ended up performing a groundbreaking concert at Severance Hall, the first ever hip hop classical concerts. So these kids played on guitar, and I performed with a small ensemble to a sold out crowd at Severance Hall. So it was like, historic stuff. So we're continually trying to, continue to save lives, but do things non-conventional in the world of mental health.
I think that's really incredible. I know that everybody sort of has their genre of music that sort of speaks to them. And I think that that's neat that you were able to combine them. Going back to you real quick, Kevin, my husband speaks very highly of Vans Warped Tour and punk. He says, he suffered with a lot of anxiety and depression and still does. And he talks about how going to Vans Warped Tour every year was one of the few places as a teenager that he felt like he belonged, that he felt like he was with people who understood him and he could just be himself. And so you have been bringing people together over, a common interest for years and years and years.
It started with that, and it blended into other genres of music too. But it was kind of that place where we always try to create an environment. And then as we grew, and we started realizing the types of issues that might be people having, that's where we got involved with organizations like Hope for the Day and A Voice for the Innocent, to write Love on Our Arms. And we never beat people over the head with it, but we gave them access to it. And I always believe that if we could create an environment that they felt safe in and have fun, that they might be able to have that hard discussion with someone. And, when you're having a good time and you're feeling good about where you're at, you might walk up to a table. So we would have it there. We continued. So one of the good legacies of the tour was that we worked with over 90 different nonprofits and organizations. And as long as they didn't, have anything to do with preaching hate, we would allow them to come, and a lot of them grew into national organizations. And the need is there, because right now everyone's, you talk to anyone in the mental health space, their workload is never been higher.
Absolutely. The Rock Hall started a summer event, which unfortunately we weren't able to hold this year. We started it in 2018, called Rock and Resilience. And it was all about bringing people together over music and connecting them to resources in the community, focusing obviously on Northeast Ohio as our immediate, community. But we had great live music, and we're hoping to keep continuing it next summer. But we brought in dozens of local social service organizations that could connect people to resources and help them, like what you said, is maybe if they're in that spot and they realize other people are dealing with the same things they are and they're in a good place, maybe they'll be able to take that step to reach out like you did, Archie, and get that help and learn to live with, what they have going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that, as far as that's one of the major things that we do with PDLB is trying to connect people with those resources. This past May, Mental Health Awareness Month, we partnered with NAMI Greater Cleveland to do basically a virtual experience, which was called The Root of It All, Self-Love in Quarantine. So The Root of It All is our annual fundraising event. This was our second annual one. And we were able to successfully partner with NAMI to do things online. We had, I think it was about 5 or 6 speakers, various psychotherapists, psychiatrists. One of the highlights was also an affiliate of the Wu-Tang Clan, who happened to be, he used to be a youth counselor within the school systems in Boston or in Massachusetts. But we also had performances. So we're always very intentional with colliding the worlds of hip hop and mental health. Entertaining, edutaining, really, is the type of thing that we'd like to do, because we don't want to scare people to think like, oh, this is like your standard support group, or this is, we're just going to breathe statistics down your throat, because people want to hear, like, in their own everyday language, what they're going through and how to cope with that.
I think that's great. I think meeting people where they're comfortable is so important. And Debbie, you use music every day to help people cope and process difficulties in their life. Music therapists, I know, have a wide range of skills and things. We at the Rock Hall actually work with music therapists for our Toddler Rock program, which is an early literacy program. But I definitely want to hear from you about your experience as a music therapist and how you've seen music make an impact on people and what you do every day.
Sure. I think music is all about connection. And really understanding and relating to the human experience through the lyrics or the emotions that the music conveys. And I think that's part of what makes music so effective and what allows people to really see themselves in the music. It gives us the opportunity to witness our own experiences, each other's experiences, and it's something that we see, music therapists see in our work almost every day, really having that opportunity to witness people's experiences and affirm that through the music that they make or the music that they share with us.
Is that typically how it goes? Is you guys are actively making music with your clients, or are you know, they're also just sharing the music they love with you?
For the most part, yeah. You know, music therapists use a variety of music experiences. We use recreative experiences, receptive experiences, composition, and improvisation. And one of the things that I usually tell when I'm meeting people for the first time, one of the things that I tell them, you know, is that sort of anything that you do with music out in the world, we can do within music therapy, is as long as you feel like this is going to help you work towards whatever goal that you have for yourself within that music therapy relationship. So, you know, it may mean that people are listening to music, but really actively listening and reflecting on how the lyrics or how the music reflects their experience. Or maybe it is about singing or writing their own music or improvising. So it really is sort of that broad spectrum of experiences, because music really allows us to express the emotions that maybe we're afraid to talk about, don't want to talk about, want to avoid, you know, for whatever reason. And the other thing that I just so strongly believe is that music tells the story of our lives. You know, when you think back, there are the songs that we associate with people and with events. And again, it allows us to just, it allows the music to sort of witness our experiences and affirm those. And I think, especially when we're going through hard things, those experiences are important so that we're not minimizing the difficulty of whatever it is that we're going through.
I think that's huge. I think recognizing the weight of the thing that somebody's going through is really important. You know, minimizing it and, you know, not addressing it can just sometimes make it worse. It can make it fester and stay under the surface. But really acknowledging what the person's dealing with, I think, can really help you start to cope and change. And what you were saying about music and how people are so connected to certain experiences, we see that so much at the Rock Hall. People come to visit, and, you know, the songs that they're hearing and the artists they're learning about are the ones they grew up with and, you know, hit a certain milestone with. I mean, I remember, you know, when my parents got divorced when I was 14 at Blink-182, you know, it just, that was for me. Like, I think I just listened to them all the time, because that was what really helped me, you know, process that and feel those emotions and really be able to sort of start processing what I was going through. I didn't know the weight of what I was dealing with. You know, I didn't really understand all my feelings at the time. But listening to that music really helped me have that release and help me, you know, feel better about, you know, what I was dealing with.
Right. And probably to feel a little less isolated.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, hearing someone say the things that I didn't even know how to say myself, and also know that other people were listening to that same music and getting something out of it. It definitely helps make you feel, oh, okay, you know, if other people can do this and if other people are having these feelings, you know, maybe I can do it too. Maybe I can figure this out and figure out how to continue on. And like Archie said, you know, live with it. You know, you're never going to get rid of it. And that's okay. And just figuring out a way to move forward with it and realizing, yeah, like you said, you aren't alone in it. Absolutely.
Can I add something there?
Please. Yes, please.
I am an avid playlister. You know, like my wife and I, ever since we started dating almost 5 years ago, like every month we put together, originally it was called like the mixtape, right? Like where, you know, couples would, you know, dub tapes of their favorite songs.
Yeah.
Well, she actually started it for us. You know, it was a mixtape that she created after our first month of dating, and we just have done it. And so sometimes we revisit those playlists, which take us back to that emotion. You know, the first year we dated, you know, we went to Roots picnic together, you know, but we bought the tickets like 6 months in advance. We didn't even know if we were going to be together at that point. You know, but we also I lost my grandfather. She lost her grandmother within a month of each other, you know, and then we moved in together. There's so many emotions there. But I also have my own playlists that, like one in particular that's called Crash, which I started after my computer at that time crashed. which if for any artist, like that's like your worst nightmare, right? But instead of like doing any type of toxic behavior, I just put on some of my favorite songs. I started dancing and started changing my mood. And one song in particular for me that I always go to, like if I'm in a depressive state, is Speeding Bullet to Heaven by Kid Cudi. Like that song, always the lyrics about if I crash, if I land, I'm all smiles. Like, and of course, all the Cudi fans like feel so soothed when he does his hums. Like it's like the biggest thing. But music is such a powerful tool. So like that in essence is also a coping mechanism, is putting together playlists. So like I definitely would recommend to anyone out there that are big music fans, start putting together playlists to help with those emotions. I can recall there was one point, this was in 2018, I actually did a panel at the Rock Hall, and earlier that day,
I was there. I think that was actually my second month of working at the Rock Hall. It was incredible.
I remember that day vividly because that same day I had to bury one of my fraternity brothers. And I, on that day, added to our monthly playlist, He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother by Donny Hathaway. And it helped me to prepare to be present for this panel discussion. So like music is a very, very, very powerful tool, to help cope.
Absolutely.
Because it can be used in so many different ways, and a lot of times it's personal and it's so individualized. Archie, I think it's awesome that you said you have that one song that when you start feeling depressed, that you can go to that, and that's one thing that's there for you. And I think that those things are probably true for a lot of people, but it's a matter of really sort of having that awareness of, oh gosh, when I hear this one, it doesn't matter what I'm doing, or, I go back to this, or it helps me to feel a little bit differently. And so that awareness is really important, I think, too.
Absolutely.
That's a really good point. It's interesting how different songs can really bring out different emotions in people, and someone can listen to the same song and both get something very different about it. But it is so deeply personal, the way that we get connected to artists and songs and what they mean for us and what they've helped us do. Like you said, Archie, how that has helped you, and music that helps you through a specific moment or that you can constantly revisit is great. My husband and I are also very big into playlists. We have specific ones also, not necessarily monthly ones, but we get into really specific playlists. And, we often play the one that we made for our wedding, and it's amazing the emotions it can bring back and how it can get you to, this, amazing place again, or even just help pick you up off the ground. It's incredible.
100%.
Now, Kevin, you've done Warped for many years, but obviously that ended after an incredible run. And it was an amazing event that brought people together. And like you said, you were able to bring in all different organizations and provide resources for people, but you're sort of switching up gears now. You're a professor now, and you started, I think, was this the first year of your new music and education festival about mental health?
Yeah, it was Talinda Bennington, Chester Bennington's wife from Lincoln Park, approached me about starting a tour. Everyone approaches me about starting a tour. Beyond Warped, I had Mayhem, I had Taste of Chaos, I had Country Throwdown, I had Sprite Liquid Mix. So, when anyone wants to throw a lifestyle tour, they usually come, we hang out, and we met, and she explained that, with Chester, and we were lucky enough to have Lincoln Park do a surprise show at Warped Tour. And it was a very special day because hometown person, Machine Gun Kelly, who's seeing a lot of success right now, got on stage and did a song with Chester and some of the other bands. But she approached me about doing a tour. And I said, Talinda, I've been doing 28 summers I've been on the road. And this is going to be my year to stay home. But let me hear what you're thinking. And 3/20 was Chester's birthday, March 20th. And she said, I'd love to do something. So trying to put on my new hat as a professor, I went to one of my classes and engaged with them, and then went to my friends at AEG and said, I need LA Live, and they're like, of course you don't want to pay for it, Kevin. I go, no, why would I want to pay for it? This is a good thing. And so we had this great event planned for May 9th. We were bringing over 80 speakers and 60 artists were going to be performing. It was going to be, a Warped Tour of mental health, for lack of it. A place
Yeah.
where people could gather, be enjoying music, being things, but have these panels and have these breakout rooms where people could go find one-on-one resources. It was really going to be a really great day, produced with my students, because I always believed my philosophy was always music, philanthropy, and education. Music, took a little bit of a backseat right now, and it's education and philanthropy. But music has to be in my heart. So we were doing that. We did a kickoff event on March 9th, and I was in the hospital on February 27th. So I was in a hospital watching it all going into just, if you've done logistics all your life, you see things changing. And I saw the protocols at the hospital changing, and I started asking questions, and people were open enough to me to tell me that, this what you're seeing on TV called Corona at this point was a bigger thing than the street we were understanding out there.
Yeah.
So we did the event on March 9th, and it was great. Ken Jeong came, and grandson came down and played, and it was a good event to show what we were going to do on May 9th. And by the 13th, everything was shutting down. Everything was rolling back. It was just like this tidal wave for everyone, and at first you're like, oh my gosh, we all thought that, in 2 weeks we'd be back up and running and it'd be okay. But it became very obvious, and it was great that we were able to pivot to an online event. We were probably one of the first big online events that pivoted by May 9th, that we were able to do 21 hours of programming. But once again, I looked at it that you were going to have some pretty heavy topics that we were going to discuss. We had a lot of heavy topics. So you would do a 50-minute panel with these 10-minute interludes of music and these cut-ins and artists playing. And so I had no idea, but I always believed you just have to charge forward. We were scrambling. The technologies were just being developed on how to really make this work. And we pulled it off. But when we really looked at it afterwards, we had 126,000 people tune in that weekend from around the country. And we had about 7 countries tune into it.
Wow.
So that topic of mental health and the stigma of talking about it across all cultures, everyone looks at it differently. We live in Southern California, which is a very diverse population. So everyone, but we as long as more people are talking about it and bringing it out in the open, that's the most important thing. And I think everyone goes, oh my gosh, Kevin, the timing. And I go, I did not time this with a pandemic, but it was relevant because we had so many great speakers. We went across the board on the speakers and panelists and musicians. We had, everyone, from Lindsey Sterling to Chris Martin to students from USC that were performers performing in it. And it was great. We're going to look on how to continue that message. I think as an industry, we're all looking at it now that it needs to be an industry-wide movement, that this is something because, we have to take care of these crews and we have to take care of these artists. And I think a lot of times, you hate to say it, but we're all looked at as a commodity in a way, and we have to take care of that commodity. And managers, agents, if you have people that can't, and I think we were pushing people on the road too quickly when they had a substance issue, especially with opioids, you can't just take 30 days off and go back on the road. There's a long process to that. So I think as an industry-wide thing, you never say that bright things can come out of a pandemic, but I think this is not just a stopgap measure, some of the things we're talking about. I think they're going to be embedded into our industry for the long run, and I sure hope they are.
I think that's a really good point. I think, looking at it as, okay, out of all the things that have been going on, where can we take it to a positive place from here? The bringing light to the things that everyone is dealing with mental health wise right now. The longer, like you said, everyone thought 2 weeks and we'd be back to normal. The Rock Hall even closed, for 2 weeks, originally planning, and all the staff thought, okay, we can do this. We'll work from home. We'll figure it out for 2 weeks. And then here we are so many months later. But, we're hearing more and more stories of people who are struggling with mental health, and people like artists and producers and crew that, aren't on the road, which is, good in some places because they can be with their family, but it's also the life that they're used to, and it's their career. And so they're missing out on a lot of their, regular parts of their lives. We have a question, if you guys are up for it, from Ashley from YouTube that ties right into this. How have you guys seen musicians handling mental health issues right now during this pandemic? You know, Archie, being a musician yourself, and then obviously Debbie and Kevin, your, you know, relationships with people and things like that. How are we seeing artists cope right now?
Well, what I can say is, I mean, we continue to create. I mean, I know for me, like, I can't speak for everybody, but the first like 2.5 weeks, I was in heaven. I didn't have to be anywhere. I didn't have to be at, you know, when you're the nature of your career, your existence, your job, whatever you want to call it, is being in front of people 90% of the time. You know, that can be exhausting if you don't take a break. And that, to me, like, that was actually a benefit. And then after I got over that initial, like,
yeah, that breather moment.
Then it was like, oh, snap, we're actually going to have to still stay indoors and not go anywhere. But, you know, I think, again, like, continuing to create, continuing to write about what's going on right now. You know, I think that for me as an artist, you know, I actually am working on my next project right now. And so being able to go to the studio, also practicing social distancing, that it's a weird time, but that's helpful. I think doing the virtual parties has been somewhat helpful. I want to shout out the Cleveland Museum of Art, and I know you guys partnered.
Yeah, for Mix. Yeah,
Amplify Mix. That was such a great time. Other things is just going for walks. I know earlier this week, me and my wife went down to Edgewater. We just hung out in the car, but like, it was so nice to be by the water, to hear the waves, to look at the sky, and a lot of soul searching, a lot of, just kind of thinking about where you are in life. Are there certain things that you have kind of been afraid to do? I know for me, like with my organization, Pilgrim Lairs back, I finally had the time to, turn my organization to a nonprofit, and now we're pending 501 status, because I had more time to devote to doing that. So there's certain things as far as staying busy. And then, last night, went to the first pandemic or post-pandemic wedding, which was an interesting experience. It was fun to be around people because, again, it has been hard, not kind of going to the routine of going to work, then coming home, going to work, then coming home. So it's a little bit, it's a weird time, I think, with a little bit of balance, and then spending time with, your close loved ones. Like, after a while, it was like, I'm going to go see my parents. Like, we keep our masks on when we're around each other, which is weird. But again, what we've talked about on this panel about the importance of human connection, that's something we can't live without. So you come up with creative ways to spend time with one another.
Yeah, it's been interesting seeing ways, we do the outside hangs with some friends and family too, just to sort of be able to have that connection and to not lose sight of that. Kevin, maybe have you seen certain things that artists are using to help them right now?
Well, I think that two parts there. One, very simple. I'm looking forward at 5:00 tonight across the street from my house on their lawn. They set up every weekend and have a jam session.
That's fantastic.
Turns out how many musicians are in our neighborhood out here in California. I mean, there'll be people will set up in their chairs, but I've become a much bigger fan of jazz. To be honest, that wasn't my favorite music, but I look forward to that 5:00. Well, it's 5:00 now. It was at 6:00, but days are getting shorter. Jazz concert that they've been doing all summer. But on the artist front, I think like you said, Archie, you had time for the first time. You had a second. The treadmill of this business, even though it's something we love and passion, it's amazing how fast and accelerated everything had become. We were constantly having to, create content as artists. They were creating. They were constantly figuring out the next tour and the next road, and it was just so much. So that gathering that time was important. Now, the managers and artists and people who started looking at things that maybe were fringe things that they didn't have time for, whether that was creating unique, merchandise, doing a podcast, doing cameos, streaming shows, and they're getting very high quality now. You go on and on, creating a hot sauce line. I know that, Cypress Hill's launching all kinds of things right now. I was just talking to their manager, and, it gave us time to maybe extend our brand as artists and people that we didn't have, because when artists were making 70-75% of all their money from live touring and live events, you went to that. That was the priority. When it comes back, if we've supplemented some of those things with other avenues, maybe that'll give someone 2 weeks at home that they didn't have before, to balance their mental health out, because everyone was finding themselves more and more on the road. Maybe because they have these outsized influences will bring some revenues and incomes. And I hate to be always talking about revenue incomes, but it's kind of true. We have to survive as people. So if you have these outsized things you've developed during this time, you may be able to spend a little more time and grounding. So when you come home, it's not a shock. We're about ready to announce
more balance to your life.
Yeah, we're announcing a program in the next couple of weeks that we've been working with about 24, 25 artists who are physically fit. I've always seen them backstage running and working out and everything. And we've teamed up with a organization called Cardio Sport out of Boston, who runs a gym, they love playing metal music and punk music and alternative music and hard hip hop into their workout programs. So the artists have had time now where they're recording workout sessions, so fans will be able to work out with them and subscribe to the subscription model. So you'll be able to work out with these artists. So physical fitness helps with mental. You hear the music, the artists are going to create playlists. It could be really cool. So it'll be like a Peloton, but they'll have a subscription model where the pot of money will go to the artists each month. So maybe that'll be the money. So we're working on all these kind of things. It's given us a little time to do that. But you know what, as anyone says, and I said when I was talking earlier to Debbie and Archie, I said, you pulled 19 semi-trucks in front of my house, I would love to set them all up in 3 hours and have a festival for everyone I know. I was going to take a break this summer. I was very lucky and fortuitous. It was my first break in 28 years.
Yeah.
Well, so that was good. But man, you want to feel that energy of the live show. You want to see the people come. You want to see, and everyone goes, well, the bands aren't the same as they used to be. I go, yes, they are. You see those kids singing as passionately at the front of a barricade as I would sing to, like, the Ramones behind me, or one of the bands I grew up with. So you never can prejudge that. And that just singing and getting your energy out. And as you said, Debbie, that music and the connecting with those songs is so important for people. And you can never judge the songs that people are connecting with, because they are just as important as anything was in our lives or anyone else's lives. And standing there right next to someone singing the song louder than each other, all of a sudden you look at someone and go, wow, there's a connection right there. And yeah, I'm getting antsy. I was all like, I'm retired, but no, when you do something on your own terms, it's great. But when it's taken away, you're like, whoa, this is not.
Yeah.
For sure. Debbie, do you have some suggestions maybe for people coping that aren't necessarily artists, but are fans or even crews that, are struggling with stuff right now because they're not working or they're not, in their normal routine, or just people, who are wondering where to turn right now?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm always careful. There's no one size fits all for a lot of things, but we know that the pandemic has increased stress and anxiety for everybody. It has really increased the mental health needs and the awareness of the disparities in terms of services. And I really think that all of the things that we knew that we were quote unquote supposed to do before are even more important now. People are tired and they're hurting, and it's important to really try and make that effort. Things in the pandemic world take longer, so I think it's really just important to kind of try and make those efforts and stretch yourself, like Kevin said, to connect with family and friends, whether it's texting, or my friends and I use a Marco Polo app so that we can send little video things to each other. Zoom fatigue is real.
It is.
Very real.
But right now, it's one of the, unfortunately, or for better or for worse, I guess, one of the best ways we have to stay connected to people and see humans. But if that doesn't work for you, go old school and just call people and talk on the phone. And really just sort of not be afraid to ask for that help and support and to reach out And it kind of goes back to what we said a little bit earlier about how sometimes just acknowledging it and putting it out there can give it a little less sort of power over you, over your life. You know, and in terms of music, there are just so many options, whether it's listening or making music. You know, somebody's got a guitar that's been gathering dust. People are doing online lessons. There are great YouTube videos out there. You know, early pandemic is when I learned about the acapella app. So
I'm not familiar with that one.
Record multiple layers of songs with yourself. So it's like
Oh, nice.
Band Light, maybe.
Okay.
And it was when that came out, I was like, oh, cool. Now I can harmonize with myself. I've always wanted to figure out how to do that. So, you know, there are a lot of creative ways that people can do things.
Yeah, I think those creative outlets are great. You know, it gives you an opportunity, you know, to hopefully maybe find something you weren't familiar with in yourself, or that, you know, you could, you know, sort of explore and check out and see if you like or not, or, you know, get to know yourself in a different way.
Yeah. I also think it's important, like, you know, if we come out of this and somebody didn't learn how to play an instrument or didn't whatever, you know, like we all just have to sort of take care of ourselves in the best ways we know how. So it's also important not to put that pressure on yourself of, oh, I've got all this time, I should learn how to bake a souffle. You know,
yeah, there's not one way that, you know, is going to be most effective for people to spend their time right now. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes you just need to lay there and just let yourself feel all the feelings and just,
Yep. But then get up and, you know,
keep going.
Yep.
There's a national mason jar shortage.
I heard that.
Everyone's canning, you know.
We definitely started a garden. We never got quite to the canning phase, but we definitely started a garden ourselves. We're like, what can we do? One of the questions we had, and maybe this is something you guys could all chime in for, you know, is there a certain type of music that you guys feel, I have my own opinions, but is there a certain type of music that you guys feel is more beneficial for mental health for people?
I think that there's really no one size fits all.
That's what I agree.
I forgot whether it was a movie or some type of skit where someone had talked about like listening to heavy metal to get in a meditative state. And for someone like me, like that might not work, but for someone like that, it might work. Like, you know, that's why, like, as far as like talking about the playlisting, you know, whatever type of music that brings you that calmness, it's almost like a, you know, for a child, like a blanket, you know, that you can latch on to bring you that kind of comfort, whatever type of music it is. I don't think that it really is because like for today, like I opened the Spotify app and they have like suggested listening for World Mental Health Day.
Oh, very cool.
Like calming, classical, peaceful meditation. Those things are naturally soothing music, but at the same time, you know, there's certain albums like, you know, again, like listening to a Kid Cudi album, you know, whether it's Man on the Moon 1 or 2, that bring me back to this state that I need to be in, you know, of calmness. So I think it varies person to person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And really, that's kind of what, at least on the music therapy end of things, one of the things we know from the research is that the things that are most effective for people are the things that they prefer. We call it patient preferred music, is really when I'm working with somebody, what's going to be most effective, again, because it's what's meaningful to them, it's what they connect to, it's what they relate with. So there really isn't, like Archie said, there's just no one size fits all. And, you know, to go back to what Kevin said too, in terms of, you know, it's really important not to sort of judge somebody because heavy metal is relaxing for them, because that's the thing that resonates with them. There's this, there's a concept known as the ISO principle that really relates to meeting people where they are. And it has to do with how that sort of relates to our own internal, energy. And so if somebody is anxious and they say, well, you know, I want to hear something that's relaxing. If it's something that if it's something that person doesn't like, they're not going to relax to it. They're going to be more irritated. So, you know, that preference and just really, again, that awareness of how am I being affected by the music is so important.
My brother loves heavy metal. He feels like he can, I've gotten this discussion with my office mates too about really loud screaming music, you know, helping them cope with things. I hate it. It just adds to the anxiety to me. I feel like I'm the one they're yelling at. I can't handle it. So that is not, you know, so it is interesting how everybody can take something away, and how, you know, that heavy metal can be really beneficial for some people because they're raging on with it. And other people are just like, nope, no, thank you.
Yeah.
It also makes me think about that film Silver Linings Playbook.
Oh, yeah.
How, you know, it was a trigger. My Sharia Moore, as beautiful and as like soothing as that song is for millions of people, you know, for Bradley Cooper's character, it was traumatic because it was the day that he found his wife cheating on him. You know, and so like it definitely varies, you know, person to person.
I would not recommend what I'm doing. I read the news, then I'm putting on like Rage Against the Machine, and I'm putting on Public Enemy, and then I start going in a circle, and then I go turn on my Calm app where there's some like Diplo sleep mix. You know, it can become a vicious cycle at times too, and I find myself in that once in a while. You know,
I think that's great. And sort of to tie along to that, you know, what are each of your guys' go-to artists or songs or bands, you know, in, you know, your sort of downtime or in time of need? You know, is there certain things that you guys reach for a little bit more than others? Or, and Archie, you mentioned a little bit of that.
Well, yeah. I'm actually looking at my Crash playlist now. So there's old Kanye songs on here. Obviously Kid Cudi, Logic. You know, he did the one song about suicide prevention. But his music in particular, I've got some Brian Eno on here, Big Sean, Drake, J. Cole. These are songs for me, like, and then I also have some John Bryan, you know, Eternal Sunshine of Spotless Mind is one of my all-time favorite movies. And a lot of times, like, just listening to that soundtrack is soothing to me. You know, so those are right now, like, those are like my main usual suspects when I'm, you know, and then others like Minnie Riperton. I love Minnie Riperton's music. Like, it's so like nurturing to the spirit, you know, hearing her voice and hearing some of the things, you know, in the same way like a Sarita, you know, was soothing as well. So it's like a mosaic of different things.
I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great description. If to be honest, so I love music that has good harmony. Doesn't matter really what genre. If the harmony is great, it just drives me.
Resonates with you. Very cool.
And you know, when we were talking about things that we've seen artists doing, I know so many artists were doing like Facebook Live things, and about once a month, I think the Indigo Girls do a Facebook Live, and I've been able to catch a lot of those because I love the guitar, I love the harmony. It makes me feel like I'm in my 20s again. And so those things. I also really love James Taylor, and I also really love classical choral music. So it's like this, you know, it is that idea of that mosaic. I think that's a great word of different things, and you know, and honestly, on any given day, it could be something a little bit different.
Yeah, and I think that's your mood. You know, it's kind of like like I was saying, and I'm not, you know, you have the Rage Against the Machine on one side of my, but then for me, it's always been about outdoors. You said you went down to the water, Archie, with your wife and just watched the waves. For me, it's always, if I can get to a place like that in my mind. So I'm going to listen to island music. I'm going to listen to Mishka, and I'm going to listen to Shaggy, and I'm going to listen to some old reggae stuff because my mind is always at peace on the water, because that's what I would always do on tour. You know, what I created was, you know, in a very bizarre way, human stew. My festivals were always general admission. They were big. They're controlled chaos. Anyone who went to work, it was very good, but there was a lot of energy there. My days off on the road always revolved, the majority of the time, was finding a lake and going to the water. Well, I didn't go to the cities. A lot of people like to go to malls on the road and do their kind of, my bus would go find a lake, and we would break out a barbecue, and I would invite a band that maybe didn't have access to that kind of stuff in their lives and take them out on a houseboat, or take them whitewater rafting, or out on a fishing boat, you know. And I would always find bands that maybe were at that point I could watch them and see them, the stresses. Maybe that was a band that was blowing up on the road, like Paramore. I remember when they were just starting to get known, and they were getting very popular in the radio stations and everything they had to do. And they were young, and I could tell they were stressful. So I emailed the manager one day and said, sorry, the band's unavailable. I'm taking them fishing. And they're like, you can't do that. The label's going to be, and I go, no, they need this day out on a boat. And I'll never forget watching their faces of them being children and kids again, just, catching little fish and jumping off and swimming and resetting your mind. So my reset's always been around nature. And I'm finding that right now we're so busy on, between teaching and working on these other projects, because it's crazy. You talk to so many people in the business right now. We're busier than ever. Everyone's trying to create, trying to figure things out. People are going, I don't know what I just did all day, but I never stopped working for 12 hours. You're on Zoom calls, you're trying to, navigate, you're doing panels, you just want to stay engaged. So, I had pretty much given up the tour bus last year, and I got a Sprinter van. And, we just found out, like, within 2 hours of LA, how much nature we actually have access to. We were always getting on planes and going places and things. So, last week we just drove out to the desert and camped for a couple of nights. And next weekend, we'll just drive up to the mountains before it gets too cold, just to reset your body. And I think that's what we have to do right now. Sometimes, we're all in the same space and we're doing so much. And then all of a sudden even though it's lovely, we all have home, hopefully most of us have a place to live. And, as artists, but you have to kind of break it up a little bit. So breaking up your routine right now is kind of important too, breaking up that routine.
I'm a little jealous of the warm weather you'll have over the next several months. The rest of us, Debbie, Archie, and myself are in Cleveland, and I'm wondering, I spend a lot of time, as much as I can, at the parks. We have a great park system here in Cleveland, and taking that time to escape and say, hey, you know what? I need to get out of a house. I need to, put myself in a new environment. And I'm wondering, okay, how's that going to go this winter?
Yeah, it's going to be a tricky time. I think we're heading into a crisis moment where we're going to have to try to figure, because we were and when we really all got locked down in March, the days were starting to get longer. We were looking at more sunshine. At least you could go out in your backyard. You could take a walk. I hear walking and being out. As these days get shorter, and the access to where we would normally socialize in indoor settings, I've had lovely times in Cleveland, but it's usually in a dark club or bar in the middle of January, and everyone's sweating on each other because they've just taken all those. That's probably not going to be available this year for most people that choose that. That's probably not the safest place. So we are entering a point of time where I think we're really going to have to prepare for this next, whether not the wave of COVID, but this wave of anxiety, the wave of stress. And this is going to be when it's really important to be reaching out to people, or maybe picking up that really focused hobby. Like you said, pick up a guitar, learn 3 chords, pick up a paintbrush, take all that stuff you grew in the garden and start jamming it into, well, you don't have mason jars, so you got to jam it into the freezer or something. But I think it's going to be and I'm already feeling it, even though it's nice and warm out here. When the days are getting shorter, I'm watching my students, the mood of them online when it's getting darker at 6 until 10, and they're learning, this environment's closing in a lot on people. So we're going to have a lot of work to do we have a lot of work to do in general as a society, but right now is going to be a real important time to keep an eye on our friends and ourselves to make sure we take care of ourselves.
Yeah, but I
would even piggyback on what Kevin had said about getting away. Like last month, I ended up taking 2 retreats. I took one retreat with my wife down to Hawking Hills, which is like a cabin reservation. And it was great. We only interacted with 2 other human beings the entire time. It was awesome. We had a fire pit there. But 2 weeks later, I ended up having to do my own creative getaway. And I ended up just going down to Euclid near Collinwood, which was literally right next to the lake. And I think that's another thing as far as artists or just creatives in general. Sometimes you just got to get away by yourself. And whoever you're with, your spouse, your significant other, also needs to understand that it's not that you don't love them any less, but just being the type of individuals that we are, where our minds are going, with all kinds of ideas or anxieties or whatever. You need to be in a space where you can just kind of let all of that out and not have to worry about all the other things that are going on in your life, just to hit the pause button. I literally had come close to having a panic attack that week prior because my anxiety was so up, like my heartbeat was going crazy. And I knew that I needed to get away. The other thing I just wanted to add was, speaking from, the perspective of being a Black male in this country and dealing with the trauma that we see on the news constantly. As you can see, I've got the Damn vinyl on my record player. I've been revisiting that a lot lately. And a lot of people have been asking, like, or wondering when Kendrick's going to drop another album. It's like, we're just now getting the full, like, gravity of this Pulitzer Prize winning album, because the same things he was talking about then in 2017 are all manifesting. Everything that's been going on with this administration, this country, no justice for Breonna Taylor, like all of the, tragic things. So a lot of times I wonder, for people of color, Black people specifically, how we cope. And music is sometimes the only way that we can continue to go on, in light of all of the racism and social injustice that happens in this country. Because like Kevin said, we've got a long way to go. So I definitely, within PDLB, I'm trying to think of ways, like one of the things I'm working on is a men's support group called Cope Dealers, where we literally talk about, real topic subject matter for Black men, but in a way that's kind of like job talk, being in the barbershop. But I am thinking about, like Kevin said as well, like when these days are getting shorter, like just picking up the phone, calling people. Like maybe we start a call tree with our friends, with our family that live alone specifically, just to make sure that they're good, because like people are really, really worried about the winter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Debbie, would you like to add to that? You had something a minute ago.
Well, I just think it's interesting, sort of seeing the ways that we have adapted since COVID started, and just the different things that people have found to do. I know lots and lots of people are getting out in nature because, it's a little bit, it seems to be a little bit safer to be outside. So, everybody's doing that. So I think it's also going to kind of be interesting to see how people adapt this winter, because people are already thinking about it. And so I think it's just going to be interesting to see, does that mean that more people are like buying sleds and really
kayaks sold out everywhere in this.
Yeah, you can't buy, what was the best thing to bring golf back? You can't buy a pull cart. You can't, it was those things that, like, industries that you were going, they were going away. Golf was dying. It was dying. And so anything that you can separate, like you said, kayaks, but unfortunately in Southern California, nature has become shut down because there's so many people that all try to use it at once, and they were crowding the trails as much as they were, in crowded spaces. They had to shut down a lot of our nature within, it's something we have to. It's kind of it's a crazy balance we have right now. And that's going to be I think the ultimate thing we have to do is help each other figure out, because sometimes we don't know what our balances are. You were talking, Archie, about that separation. My wife's greatest time of the week are those 8 hours twice a week I come into the garage out here and teach class, because that's her time alone to not have to deal with me, bouncing around. She's like, noon to 8 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It's my greatest time of the week.
I think trying to recognize what we all need, and the fact that your wife knows, okay, that's the time I'm going to have to myself. And, like what you said is, I think everybody, there isn't one size fits all. So everybody needs something else. And I think one of the first steps is, if you're able to help yourself figure out, or even reach out to someone, a counselor, a therapist, someone, even a good friend, and even have them help you figure out, what is the things that help you in the time. It's different for everybody. Some people want that alone time. Some people want, just to sit and watch a movie and get their mind off the stress. Some people want to throw themselves into that hobby. Everybody is going to really need something different. And so figuring out what is going to be most beneficial. And, when this all first started, we all were thinking short-term coping mechanisms. And as I think that's one of the reasons so many people are now talking about it, is we see ourselves going into the winter and we're thinking, okay, so this isn't going to get fixed tomorrow. what can I sort of help lay out? And I think that that's really key. If you can help sort of set yourself up with some resources and some things to be able to reach out, so that when you're in that moment where you're like, oh, I'm not in a great place right now, you can sort of hopefully tap into one of those resources that you've sort of lined up for yourself to be able to reach out when you need to.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting pretty close to an hour, so I just wanted to give you guys an opportunity if there's, anything else you want to add or mention on here, anything like that you'd like to sort of throw in before we wrap this up today.
One of our nonprofits, has a term. It's okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
And so many people in the industry and everyone who runs their own businesses and things like that, where people come to you for answers all the time. You're going to have your bad days, and it is okay to say, like, I just can't help you right now. I want to, and I'll be back to you when I can, but it's okay not to be okay on certain days.
Yeah.
And it's important to recognize those days and start to learn your own coping mechanisms to be able to get out of that. And if you can't, there's lots of organizations to reach out. There's a lot of resources out there. It's amazing how many people want to help you when you need it.
Yeah, and all of those organizations are finding creative ways to be present for people.
Yeah.
So, just finding those resources, and then and they're able to be available, even though we are more isolated.
Yeah, I would kind of add on to what Debbie and Kevin stated. The other thing is, get off of this, get off your phone, take some time away from social media, the news. Twitter is my source for the news for the most part, and then Cleveland.com. So I basically am in control with how often or whatever I digest, because it's a lot, dealing with that. It can get you really riled up. But at the same time, it's okay to be, to not be okay. And the other thing is, for the longest time in the Black community, we thought that, therapy was a luxury, or therapy was something that our white counterparts did, and part of the reason why Pildum Layersback exists is to show that no, like, therapy is for all of us, and you don't have to be, the old adage of being a strong Black woman or a strong Black man, and swap, and stiffening your upper lip and all that. And it's like, no, like, the most human thing that you can do is cry, because we are beings of emotion. And so, the main thing I always try to tell people is, feel all the feels. Don't hold back on any of that, because they're going to spill out, whether it's in drug use, alcohol, sexual abuse, and all these other toxic things. And the other thing I guess I would also add is seek out professional help. Like, even if you feel like there's nothing really wrong, your brain is a muscle. So, like, going to therapy is like going to the gym, it's like getting a good exercise in to kind of like lay out, like, on my therapist, like, all the things I've been thinking since our last session, and how I can, move forward, to also feel better. But even on days where I'm like, I feel great, like, it's still great to go to therapy.
I see a counselor and it's not often, but I consider it very much preventative care. The same way you go and you check in with the doctor and make sure things are good. I make sure I check in, and, obviously there's times where I need to lean on that resource a little bit more heavily when I'm going through something a little bit deeper. But I think, if you're able to having that regular check-in, and having that resource also at your fingertips, so when you are at a tough point, you can reach out. I think, Cam, like what you said, even if you think you're doing great, it's nice to have that. I very much consider it preventative care, to have that in my wheelhouse of resources.
Yeah, and there's
one other. I'm sorry, Debbie. Go ahead.
It's okay. I was just going to say, it's such a great way to normalize those experiences of going to therapy, and what you said about it's okay to not be okay, because we are all not okay at one point or another.
Yeah.
And so, and to having like networks of people, so that if it's that, you reach out to somebody and that's not their okay day, you've got somebody else. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Thanks, Debbie. And what were you going to say, Archie?
The other thing I was going to add is one of the things that I did this past February before everything was shut down is I got my mental health first aid certification.
Oh, very cool.
And one of the things that I'm excited about is Pilgrim Lairs Back is looking to partner with NAMI to start, really it's this ambition that I have to get 500 members of the African American community mental health first aid certified, because basically what this training does is for that individual who says, well, my son is going through something, or my aunt or my uncle or my dad, my mom, and I just don't know how to approach them. Or if it's someone that is dealing with something that they don't even know, it is like the basic essential knowledge of what mental illness is and how to approach someone that is going through something, whether they're suicidal, whether they have depression, anxiety, or bipolar disorder, or even schizophrenia. And so one of the things that after I got my certification, like I feel that we all should be mental health first aid certified, because it can mean the difference between life and death. When you know how to communicate with someone who's in a depressive state, when you know how to objectively communicate with someone who's feeling suicidal or who's talking about committing suicide, it can really be the fine line between life and death. So I would also implore anyone watching, go to your local NAMI chapter and find out more information on how to get mental health first aid certified.
Good idea.
This has been great. Anyone else before we jump off for today?
Lovely. It's been great joining all of you.
Yeah, I want to thank all of you guys for sharing your own experiences. I want to thank our audience for spending their part of their Saturday with us. World Mental Health Day is so important, and I was really happy that we were able to bring some folks together to discuss some really important topics. So I want to thank everybody, and I think we're going to say goodbye for now.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Look forward to getting back to Cleveland at some point.
We'll love to have you back, Kevin.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you.